Thank you, Jakob, for sharing your views on the challenges and opportunities. And then we are going to hear from Brittain from the Norwegian Water Resources and Energy Directorate on the role of hydropower in the green transition. So we'll just go directly to you, Martin.
Right, thank you, Anders. Okay, thanks for inviting NVE and the Director General of NVE, Kjetil. Unfortunately, he didn't have the possibility to come today, so I've stepped in. We really appreciate the invitation, and the topics today are very important to discuss, but it's also very complex to find this intersection between increasing need for power, the environmental values, and social considerations. We will get one step closer by meeting here and discussing possibilities and looking at solutions together. I think the two presenters before me have emphasized this. Today, I will talk about the role of hydropower in the green shift. But first, I would like to start with some energy facts about Norway. The figure shows the development of power production and consumption in Norway since 1990. Hydropower dominates, as you can see, given the light blue column, but we also have some wind and thermal power production. Of the total installed capacity of approximately 39,000 megawatts, around 15% of this is wind power. The typical consumption, the red line on the presentation behind me, is 140 terawatt hours a year, which means we often have a good power balance. But we do have periods where the power balance isn't as good as shown here. So, and as we spoke of, Anders spoke of it earlier, we have 50% of all flexible storage capacity in Europe. That amounts to 87 terawatt hours in a normal year. So some years the variation of inflow may be a challenge, but the power trade therefore plays a key role in the Norwegian hydropower system. It's important both for security of supply and for value creation for the industry. Right. The power market in Norway and Europe has been through a major change the last 20 years. As a result of increased electrification and increased consumption, the maximum power requirement is expected to increase in 2030 and onwards due to less thermal energy and more unregulated wind power in Europe. Several countries in the Nordics and Europe are investing heavily in sun, onshore, and offshore wind. All this is unregulated power production, which produces based on the weather. Our analysis, however, show that there's a large degree of correlation in wind power production in the Nordic countries and Northern Europe. If there's little wind in the southern part of Norway, there's also little wind in the nearest neighboring countries in which we are connected. This can therefore become a challenge, as all these countries are dependent on imports from neighboring countries. The Nordic region already has an output deficit today. To cover consumption in periods with little wind and sun, other technologies are needed. For example, also, we could use electrical flexibility for both consumers and industry, energy efficiency in buildings, batteries, hydrogen. But we need to ensure more flexible production to balance the power production, the power system in the future. That was a bit quick there. Norwegian flexible hydropower with reservoirs is important to maintain the balance of the Nordic grid, together with the other Nordic countries as well and their capacities. There is a need for power plants that can deliver very large capacity during periods of less sun and wind. In this context, it's important to discuss sustainable hydropower development. So, tools for a sustainable hydropower sector. NVE, the Norwegian Water Resources and Energy Directorate, has the management responsibility for all power plants subject to a license. The administrative responsibility covers the entire application process, from notifications, applications, and to follow up during both construction and running of the power plants after they've been put into operation. So, sustainable hydropower development is important for Norway. NVE and other agencies have put a lot of effort on environmentally and socially sound hydropower projects. The most important tool, I believe, is a good legislative framework and administration with power to enforce relevant licensing conditions. In order to preserve nature, many watercourses are permanently protected against hydropower development. And today, as Anders spoke of earlier in his presentation, we have 390 protected watercourses in Norway. We need acknowledgement in multidisciplinary fields to ensure good solutions and environmental supervision from the planning phase to the operational phase of power plants. There's a need for common regulatory framework, such as the European Water Framework Directive, to achieve sustainable development. The Water Framework Directive is an integrated part of NVE's licensing process. So I'll give you a brief status of what's sort of in the pipeline, new hydropower development. Today, NVE has notifications or applications that we know of that could lead to approximately 1.4 terawatt hours of new hydropower. Most likely not enough to meet our surroundings, the expectations from them. There will be consequences, of course, when developing hydropower. Consequences on environment and surroundings must be weighed against the need for new power. Licensing processes will be focused on environmental consequences, and it has been and will do in the future. We also have done and will do lay the best practice possible when establishing new hydropower plants. When granting a new license, rules of operation are always given, always minimum water release, along with landscaping, fish pass, and if necessary, and other mitigation measures that could reduce or minimize the consequences. And it's important to say that irregularities do lead to penalties. So NVE follows up both during construction and operation. We also have a fair amount of applications for small hydro, but approximately, and this is due to our sort of experience with the licenses that are in, that 50% of all applications will not be granted. And that's because of the negative consequences for the environment and surroundings. NVE also, at the moment, gives priority to applications and notifications of bigger hydropower plants and improving the use of established reservoirs and existing hydro plants projects, leading to more flexible storage and effect. For improving the environment and sustainability in regulated rivers and existing hydropower installations, NVE has different legal instruments that we can use, and revision of licensing conditions is one of the most important ones. The licensing conditions for large hydro can be revised every 30 years. And the main purpose is to improve the environment in old regulated rivers and modernize and update terms and conditions. New mitigating measures must be weighed against power production, which is the purpose of the license. This map behind me shows cases at the various stages, and there are relatively large geographical areas that have either been audited or in the process. At the moment, we have completed 26 revisions, and 54 are either within NVE or being handled by the ministries. So each individual case may contain several licenses, these geographical areas, and power plants within, and there are lots of different conflicting interests that have to be balanced. And there are often several municipalities also involved in one area. So in line with the Water Framework Directive, NVE aims at preventing deterioration through the licensing process for new hydropower, and at the same time enhance the ecological status on existing facilities in the rivers. Revision of licensing terms is the most important instrument excuse me, to achieve the environmental objectives in the Water Framework Directive, in addition to summoning the licensing and supervision. We have to use the whole toolbox. The figure to the right shows the status of revisions of license terms and summoning for licensing related to environmental objectives. We aim at setting new license terms and implement the necessary measures within the respective deadlines in river basin management plans for 2027 and 2033. And NVE will give a high priority to cases regarding measures to achieve environmental objectives according to the Water Framework Directive. So that concludes my presentation for today, and thank you again for your attention, and I hope that you have a great conference and with good and fruitful discussions. Thank you very much.